Why can't you be a very aesthetic Mitsu while at the same time seeing through the emptiness of the Mitsu? I actually think bodybuilding is one of the most key factors that kept me grounded throughout all those years of like spiritual awakening and unfoldment.
Yes.
But most people who commit suicide, why do they point a gun to their head? They're trying to silence their inner voice. They're trying to quote unquote kill their ego. But they're just trying to kill an idea. Sex is not the center of attention anymore. Another way I describe this state is kind of like the universe is in itself raw without a condom. You can still enjoy sex on the human level, but that just becomes something that's like eating a really nice meal.
How do you know if you're fully awakened?
Well,
this is a English-speaking episode on a primarily German-speaking podcast. And that's why you can skip the next 3 minutes of this intro and start right at the beginning of this conversation. Meine Freunde der Freiheit, willkommen zurück bei The Chainless Life, deinem Podcast für ein freies, selbstbestimmtes Leben. Heute mal wieder ausnahmsweise mit einer englischen Episode und ihr wisst ja, dass wenn ich mal eine Ausnahme mache, das immer einen guten Grund hat und mein heutiger Gast hat auf jeden Fall einen Spot auf dem ChainlessLIFE Podcast verdient, denn ich verfolge ihn schon seit über 10 Jahren. Er war damals einer der wohl interessantesten und auch abstraktesten Fitness-Influencer im amerikanischen Raum. Er wurde mehrmals auf YouTube gebannt wegen seinen kontroversen Videos, über die wir auch am Anfang sprechen. Und in den letzten Jahren hat er in meinen Augen eine sehr interessante spirituelle Transformation durchgemacht und auch, wie er selbst behauptet, den Weg zur Erleuchtung erlangt. Und ich würde sagen, ich bin ein ziemlich skeptischer Mensch und ich würde das nicht jedem so glauben, aber Frank Yang hat es geschafft, mich davon zu überzeugen, dass er auf jeden Fall tiefer geblickt hat, als das die meisten Menschen in ihrem Leben machen werden. Und zwar auch ohne die Hilfe von Psychedelics, zumindest nicht mehr in den letzten Jahren, sondern nur durch Meditation und das vertiefte Verständnis von Buddha persönlich. Und das nicht nur auf der literarischen Ebene, sondern eben auch wirklich durch 3 bis 4 Stunden Meditieren jeden Tag über mehrere Jahre plus mehrere Vipassanas. Und das hat ihn nach seinen eigenen Aussagen zum Buddha-Enlightenment geführt, über das wir heute auch sprechen werden. Also nicht nur über seinen Weg zum Buddha-Enlightenment, sondern wie er sich heute fühlt. Also wie kann man sich das vorstellen, erleuchtet zu sein? Das wollte ich mal wissen und ich bin sehr gespannt, wie du Frank Yang einschätzt, nachdem du jetzt hier zuhörst, denn ich könnte mir gut vorstellen, dass du vielleicht noch eine ganz andere Meinung zu ihm hast als ich und ich würde sagen, dass ich nach dem Gespräch auch noch mal ein bisschen anders auf ihn blicke als zuvor, aber über das sprechen wir im Outro nochmal. Jetzt geht's zuerst mal in die Folge. Ich wünsche viel Spaß, viele Learnings und gute Unterhaltung mit Frank Yang.
Creating concrete visions of a macrocosmic prism with a brilliant optimism.
With people like you, I know you never know when it starts, when it ends, what's happening. So you rather catch it quick, right?
that's kind of true. Yeah, I'm catching it. So what's up, man? Like you said, you sent me a message a few months ago saying you started watching some of my older videos.
Bro, you have no idea, man. You know, when the first time I saw you, I just thought about before recording this podcast with you. I thought about it. So it had to be over 10 years ago when I started watching Matt Ogus.
Oh, man, holy shit.
yeah, OG as fuck. And I just remember that he had this intro or outro of you, like deadlifting like 500 pounds, like, ah, motherfucker. And then this is how I saw you the first time. And then I found your channel. And somehow I just got stuck there for a while, man. You were just different than anybody else. I really like that.
Thanks.
So I saw you already the old days.
2010 or something, right?
The BBC days, bro.
Yeah, that was like 2010. Yeah, YouTube won't allow me to do this kind of stuff anymore, but I'm glad I'm not really into that stuff anymore.
Yeah. What was your motivation to the BBC, or do you want to explain what that was, maybe, or do you feel comfortable sharing that past piece?
I think the people who know what I'm talking about will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but you never got in trouble for it.
Did I get in trouble for it? Not that particular one, but I've gotten in trouble with a lot of other things that kind of are similar. One time I went out on the street with a mattress and had simulated sex with my ex-girlfriend. We took all of our clothes and just got on the mattress in the middle of the road. I just wanted to do an like performance installation art, but then I got arrested for that.
Uh,
And this other time, there's several times when I was lifting weights naked on the street
uh-huh.
in
Uh-huh.
Taiwan mostly. Yeah, but okay, my motivation for these things are pretty much the same. I have an idea spontaneously, and I just do it.
You just want to
Kind
do
of like
it.
what I'm doing right now, except back then I had no idea what that was. Yeah, it's kind of like flow state, but back then it was like flow state was a state for me. It was like a peak experience where I accessed a lot when even when I'm editing or lifting weights or playing the violin. But now it's like flow state with a capital F. It's 24/7.
Yeah, that's obviously what we're gonna talk. That's what we're gonna talk today for sure. I remember one video that was actually the first video where, because I would say I have a extremely high tolerance in craziness and weird shit. So I can laugh about the worst jokes. I have no boundaries basically. But I remember that one video, and I think you had to take it down. It was just your face, and you were masturbating on like a rooftop or something.
Oh, wow, you got deep into
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
man, wow.
I just remember, man, after watching the video, I was like, okay, maybe he's a little bit too crazy for me. Like,
Wow.
yeah,
You know, I
but
really talk to people nowadays that people sometimes mention the deadlift videos, and
yeah,
then when you get to the BBC, it's already like even more rare. And then when you mention that one, that's like on Vimeo. That's like the what I used to call like the subconscious of the subconscious stuff that I used to.
yeah. But then for some reason you got too philosophical for me, and I wasn't in that stage yet. I was still in the hey, I just want to fucking get big stage. So then all of a sudden I saw you with Elliot Hulse doing
Oh,
5-MeO DMT.
oh
And that's
wait,
when I
wait.
started, or
I
was
don't
that
think
not 5-MeO?
I don't think I did anything with Elliot Halls. Like not
You were
not.
laying on a table or something, and a crazy
Oh, okay.
footage.
Yeah,
What
he
was
was
that?
just, making me breathe. He was just making me breathe into my balls. And actually, the funny thing is, sort of, you saw him kind of come full circle. I didn't know what he was trying to do until like the last couple of years. It's like, oh, the importance of breathing and relaxation of the body and like watching your breath and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. So anyway, really, really cool that we're talking today because, like I said, you're in my field for quite some time, and you really popped up again. Like I think it was like 2 years ago when I was getting ready for my first Vipassana,
Oh, okay.
and just like seeing the content you were making, it was speaking so much to me. And since then, I was just following you again, and I see what you're doing right now, and I think it's great. So for my agenda today is to just obviously like scratch a little bit the surface of who is Frank Yang on a personal level. We just did already a little bit, but maybe also on what's today, and then also just to follow a little bit the way of your enlightenment journey, your self realization journey, and then for me the most interesting questions I have is obviously about the now. Like, what are you perceiving now? How do you feel now living as the Buddha, quote unquote, you could say, right? In a way,
Everyone is
because
the Buddha. That's what I tell
huh?
people. I tell people everyone is the Buddha.
Yeah,
We all have
you
our
know,
Buddha. Yeah. The only difference between your mind and other people's mind and the Buddha's mind is just a degree of density, degree of solidity. Like Buddha experiences his mind, or his mind is the same as the world. He
mm,
experiences that, the direct experience of who he really is, what he really is, like air. But then if you're in a very contracted state, let's say you've never meditated, maybe you're like a solidity, you're very solidified. So you go from solidity to liquid to smoke to air. But the difference,
mhm.
what's the difference? It's still, quote unquote H2O, right?
Yeah, and I know, since this is a podcast channel with quite some, I would say, like beginner state people, and also most of them are speaking German. So I know that when you talk about solidity, maybe they won't understand everything perfectly, but we will try to just translate it. Because really, man, Frank, just one thing before we start. There's so many people out there talking about that shit. There's
Yeah.
older people, there's teachers, there's books, there's so many people who take that shit seriously. But for some reason, when you said, man, I felt like I had an enlightenment, I just believed you. I saw those videos, I saw your eyes, I saw who you were before. And obviously, you never know until you know. But I just feel like, yeah, I believe the things you say, and they come from a very curious place too. So just to maybe dive into a little bit into this big question of like, what did you like? How did you get into all of this? Like, what was the trigger?
So the trigger for all of this really started like maybe before I was born. I think a lot of it is just your karma. When I say karma, it's just the causes and condition that makes up who you are, or that makes up the present moment. Right. So, but then on the more conventional personal level, you can say I started this when I was starting to make videos when I was about 14 years old. Even before that, I was already making art when I was like, before I could speak, I was making art already. So that was the first memory I have of just having this like very authentic inclination to transcend to the next level and to explore what the mind is, explore what creativity is. But back then, of course, I was very young. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. But looking back on it, I've been doing that all my life. But at the same time, everyone is doing that, right? So I started out painting, doing art as a kid, and then my mom made me practice the violin, and then that sort of developed this discipline of just wanting to get better at this artistic pursuit. And then after that, I started to get into as a teen of bodybuilding, especially the explosive training stuff like powerlifting, getting stronger, yeah, jumping higher, running faster. I just wanted to run faster for no reason than other than running faster and jumping higher, and that led me to bodybuilding eventually. I was like, okay, I'm done with the like you said, the 500 raw deadlift, the 400-pound squat, 300-pound raw bench at around like 160 pounds. I was like, okay, I've done all that. I reached my goal. Every time I reach my goal, I move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I reached that goal. I was already like a pretty professional violin player, like semi-professional violin player. And then after I reached the goal of the strength training, I started doing bodybuilding. I was like, I saw Zeus. I was like, holy shit, this guy is Zeus. He's just trolling. He has a really great physique. And he's like, kind of like living life in a flow state while being shredded. I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
man.
I want to do that, but I want to do that in a more artistic way where I want to mindfuck people. Like instead of just mindfucking people with just my physique, I want to mindfuck people with ideas. And that is around the same time I got into like philosophy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So philosophy, and even though philosophy is a big shift on the
Yeah.
mental level, there's still for me the question of the first time you actually felt like sitting down and meditating, like actually
Oh,
like
okay.
this could actually be a good idea.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, it's all related. But after philosophy, I was like, okay, I train my body. Now I have to train my mind. And then after I get really deep into philosophy, mostly Western philosophy, I started getting into Eastern philosophy, like Osho, Alan Watts. Yeah,
I love
and
Alan Watts,
like
man.
Alan Watts is great, and it's just,
Just as a side note, would you say Alan Watts
he's
was
awakened.
self-realized as a mind, but he never really got into the emotional stuff, or how would
Maybe,
you
yeah,
see it?
I think Alan Watts from his writing, I believe he's reached the anatta realization. And which we
Yeah.
can talk about what that is in a little bit. But
Uh-huh.
I believe Alan Watts was awakened, but I don't think he's fully integrated. That's why he's still like drinking alcohol all day long and then
Uh-huh.
eventually die of alcoholism. Yeah, I mean,
Uh-huh.
you can be pretty awakened and very realized and still not have a lot of your subconscious stuff integrated.
Yeah.
And actually, some of the stuff, when you experience some of the subconscious stuff in the state of, let's say, non-dual awareness, it can be even more intense than before in some ways. But we can get into that later. But I got into Alan Watts, and then I started to read about altered state of consciousness. I read the
Uh-huh.
book, The Doors of Perception, Aldous
Uh-huh.
Huxley. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, there's something to this thing. Maybe I'll try psychedelics. But back then, psychedelics wasn't very popular yet, right? So I had to order them off of Silk Road before Bitcoin was even a thing. So like, I just had this inclination to like just drill, finding the truth, figure out what the fuck this is, figure out what the fuck I am. That's basically the question that everybody asks, right? Back then in fitness too, it's like I want to know how to jump higher, and then I'm just gonna go for it. And then the same thing with the altered state of consciousness. And I didn't do a lot of psychedelics. I wasn't a psychonaut, but I experimented with psychedelics like once every few months for like maybe a year or two.
Mhm.
And then I was like, okay, there's something here. Like the mind that is infinite. Like the potentiality of the mind seems like it's infinite. I want to keep exploring. But however, I don't want to be relying on substances. So I looked into meditation. Okay, how do I quote unquote lock this state so that it can become my sort of this permanent default state of consciousness?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I started to hear a lot about spirituality teachings, how like, okay, actually when you take psychedelic, you're just have glimpses of your true nature, what you really are. So I started to get in meditation. I started doing TM, and then
TM, okay. Yeah.
TM was the first thing that I did. And another reason why I got into meditation, other than just transcendence and exploration of the mind, is was a sex addict and I wanted to reduce my sex drive. So I thought meditation was going to help with that. So it did actually, and we can. That's another topic. So those two reasons really, but they're actually the same thing. It also increased creativity, just becoming more intelligent on the conventional human level. Yeah, and then I went to my first Vipassana retreat 2 years after I started meditating for the first time, and then it just took off from there.
Would you say, because you said you already started reading Alan Watts and Doors of Perception, which is still, it's not philosophical per se, but it's still like mental masturbation to a certain degree, reading those things. Who was your first, was it Cuenca, your first like teacher, meditation teacher? Like, I'm actually going to sit down for this guy and actually going to do what he says? Or who was the first voice that came into your consciousness where you were like, wow, this guy's touching me in a way that I actually want to do this?
Okay, well, I think the first time I sat down to meditate when I took the TM course, I already knew that there was something to this thing, even though I was barely scratching the surface. Yeah, but then I started reading Sam Harris, and he talks about the direct experience of insights, right? It's not just intellectual understanding. And for those of you who uh, don't know the distinction, I look at this whole spiritual path as having three levels of quote unquote understanding or progression. The first level is intellectual understanding. You read about it in terms of like concepts and theories. What is non-duality? What is awakening? What is consciousness from language, from the level of concept?
Mhm.
So that's kind of like reading the menu of like food. Go to a restaurant, just reading the menu, or reading bodybuilding magazine without lifting the weights. And then the second stage is experience. Now you started to taste the food directly, experientially. Now you started to lift the weights, right? Then you get those temporary experiences of what they're talking about. And then the third stage of understanding is a realization. That's when the experiences becomes locked in into your permanent state of consciousness. And that's when you're full, like your stomach is full. But even after that, you have to digest it. That's when you start to integrate the insight into everyday life.
Mhm.
So we sit down into like everything that you do in life 24/7. And that's what I've been working on for the last like 3 years after my permanent shift into this state.
Yeah. Yeah, but what I also felt was amazing to hear because my sister actually got diagnosed with bipolar like a year ago and she's suffering really badly from it. And just hearing that you also had this diagnosis and transcended this very physical, you could even say neurochemical condition, which is not like to the standards of Western medicine today, it's not something you can heal. You can just treat it with lithium and other drugs. So would you still say that you don't experience any episodes anymore at this point right now? Just
No
from
episodes. No
yeah,
episodes. Yeah, but
yeah, that's
no,
insane.
I'm still very energetic, but I don't get like depressed like I used to be. Not
Hmm.
even close. Yeah, and I don't get manic, but I get excited about things, but 24/7 I'm in this state of I guess you can call it unconditional happiness, where you're just happy for no reason. Because back then when I was like excited about something, excitement or happiness from that level actually only arises from sadness. Pain and pleasure are
Uh-huh.
together at the same point. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I mean, I already saw all your videos on YouTube, which I highly recommend people to watch when they're really interested in that stuff. But maybe for the people who just start with this idea of self-realization and enlightenment, quote unquote, awakening, how would you describe for somebody very new the different stages of enlightenment, like you went through, also maybe through those last 3, 4, 5, 6 years?
Oh, okay. The different stages. Okay, let's go from first the ego mind, right? Because I have this stages of realization mapped out a little bit. There's only three stages. But those stages are after awakening. But before awakening, there's the ego stage, right? You're just contracted in the head. You're perceiving the world from the perceiver inside the head, right? And then
So
after that,
so so you would say I am Frank
I am
Yang, this meat suit, I'm this body, and those are
identified.
other people. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, there's other
contracted.
people over there. Yeah, you contract it into a separate entity, and that's the thing you're trying to dissolve throughout this path. And that's it, really. All the different stages are just the dissolution of that. How much you dissolve is equivalent to what stage you're in. So the line between stages, there really isn't a line, right? When you go from like solidity to liquid to smoke to air, like where's the line, right? But then you can categorize it from one level. to the next on a conventional level, but it's all the same thing. So the next stage is the witness stage. It's kind of like just witnessing your thoughts, witnessing your ego mind, witnessing your body. But then you're still creating this witness. And a lot of people get into the stage
Mm-hmm.
and like mindfulness. And you can get stuck on any stage. If you're stuck in the witness stage, you realize that you have to kind of maintain the witness. The witness, there is still a very subtle form of contraction. It's a less solidified version of the ego. But the witness, you're still observing from a vantage point. There's still a duality between the observer, the witness, and that which you're trying to witness. Right. And the third stage is what I call the I amness phase, or the power of now, like unbounded consciousness or eternal witness. Like the witness now is becoming even less solidified. Instead of the witness being somewhere like behind the head watching your thought, the witness is now all pervasive. Right. So it's kind of like mind with a capital M. Like that's when I started talking about how like this whole field is the space is open up to be boundless and timeless, right? And without any boundaries. So that's the I amness phase.
How would you say, how did it feel for you to transcend the witness stage? Like how did it happen, and how did it feel, and how did you were you able to describe it back then? What was the thing?
I think I transcended the witness phase on my second Vipassana retreat. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
just I was inquiring into what the witness is. Yeah, I was doing a lot of body scanning in the Goenka retreat. You just scan your body up and down. But then I was also scanning the witness. I was scanning the one that's doing the body scanning. So the witness, another way to describe the witness is the meditator, right? The meditator
Mhm.
that's trying to do the meditation. But the point is not to become a meditator. The point is to dissolve the meditator, even to realize there was never a meditator. It's always just been like the universe meditating to itself, so to speak. So you start to witness even the witness. By witness something, you dissolve in it.
But was that a constant realization, or was that just like a glimpse into it for a moment?
At first, it was like glimpses. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was like short glimpses. But then once it's shifted, it's shifted. After my first, second retreat, the witness is still there a little bit, but it's mostly gone. It's mostly just I'm just perceiving this whole field. But then there was still a bubble, a very limited bubble. Like it's just the witness just got bigger. That's it. Right?
Uh-huh.
But then eventually, even that completely dissolves. So then you go into the next stage, which is what I call non-dual union, and that is like merging with everything or nothing, sort of like this absolute union, right? And that's kind of like the state most people talk about when they talk about non-dual awareness. Actually, the first the unbounded consciousness stage is also kind of non-dual, but even non-duality, there's different stages to it. It depends on how much solidity you dissolve. Right. So the non-dual union, the subject object start to merge.
Mhm.
Because in the unbounded consciousness, you can perceive unbounded consciousness, or even like Brahman, whatever you want to call it, just fancy words to describe this, space of consciousness that's, limitless. You can perceive that, but still have an object over there and a
Yeah.
subject over here. There's still a duality. There's still a center that's perceiving the object that is boundless consciousness. And in the next stage, the subject object collapses even more. And now everything almost becomes centerless.
Centerless.
Yeah, the next stage is anatta realization. That's the last, quote unquote, last stage. But even after that, there's further development, but there's no more like quote unquote shifts. So anatta realization is also called the emptiness realization, or the realization into dependent origination. And that's when you completely dissolve the center, and the seer, hearer, doer, thinker, observer is totally gone, right? And then you perceive the substrate of awareness to be empty also. Because in the previous stage, you can still perceive awareness, even though there's very little distinction between subject object, or no distinction. You can still verify or make awareness a substrate or a thing, some
Mhm.
kind of a ground of existence or truth into reality. But then even that is just an idea.
It's interesting because listening to you, and I'm also reading this book, Seeing That Freeze right now,
Yes, good,
which
good.
yeah, really good book, which doesn't overcomplicate things. But then there's also this other guy I really like to listen to, like Rupert Spira.
Yeah,
You know
Spare.
this guy?
Yeah,
Um, and he talks about the direct path, or like the pathless path, not even like having a path anymore. And he really just says like, I just recognize awareness. What stage is that, or like what is he doing with the people? Because he basically doesn't say like, hey, body scan, don't go through all those phases, but just like bam, just
yeah.
be
Mm.
non-meditative meditation.
Yeah, there's a lot of teachers that teach from that place, which they're not wrong. That's just a different approach. But usually it's both. Usually there is a progress, but at the same time, there is no progress. So that's another duality that you eventually reconcile, right? People are always asking, oh, if you're already awake, if you can just tap into awareness right now, why do you need to go through this process and this
Exactly.
progression? Yeah, but
Yeah,
the
why?
it is it's both. To me, there's no distinction between progress and non-progress, but that's because I'm speaking from the non-dual perspective. But when I was going through the path, I didn't really question this too much. I was just doing my practice and then just having shifts after shift after shifts. But I do realize a lot of people's path come from this direct path where they just keep glimpsing into the nature of mind, keep glimpsing into the nature of mind over and over until they stabilize it. So that's sort of the more like non-dual direct path. But I
Yeah.
think for people to progress, they need both. A lot of people get stuck in the direct path just as much as people are getting stuck in the progression path. People are going to be Vipassana retreat for like 10, 20 years, but they're not getting anywhere because they're just strengthening the meditator. But the other
Uh-huh.
path, the direct path also has its traps, right? Ruber Spiral is mostly speaking from the unbounded consciousness phase. The same with Eckhart Tolle, like the power of now kind of thing. Yeah, because they're kind of still making awareness into some kind of a substrate that's distinct from sensations or phenomenons.
And what would you say is the trap of this path?
The trap of this path is, first of all, even if you can access non-dual awareness, you can bypass a lot of your stuff, like a lot of your human stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can fail to like do shadow work. Yeah, or you don't have the stabilization of the mind to even
Mm.
stabilize that. That's why going to Vipassana, cultivating samatha or concentration is also quite important. Actually, if you look at all those, most of those non-dual teachers that talk like that, oh, there's nothing to do. You just recognize right away. If you look at their path, they've done like
Yeah.
hours of meditation, right? So they're speaking from the place they're in right now. But for a lot of people, that's not very helpful.
Yeah, it's like the multimillionaires. It's like the
Exactly.
multimillionaire entrepreneurs that made so much money, and now they say like, "Yeah, my
Oh,
morning
really
routine
money.
is like ice baths and work-life balance, and I work just 3 hours a day."
Yeah.
It's yeah, I see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
need to
see
set
that.
up the right conditionality to even be able to let go. So like Buddha did that, right? The Buddha had to go through like 7 to 10 years of hardcore meditation. He tried everything. He went through all the jhanas. He tried the ascetic kind of approach where he starved himself to almost death to realize that wait, we have to find the middle way. So I guess what I'm really talking about is that you want to find the middle way. No matter what you're doing, you find a middle way between effort and effortlessness, between seeking and non-seeking,
Mhm.
in expansion and contraction, the way I call it.
I would say, speaking from my own experience, that without my 5-MeO DMT experience I've had 4 years, 3 years ago, I wouldn't have gone this path like that deep because that cracked open everything I've ever even like was able to comprehend. So I don't know how you would describe this short 20-minute realization or whatever that was. But when I came back, or what was left of me, knew, okay, there's no fucking way that this is the way it is. So that's where I am today now. And I also know that you, after your first Vipassana, also had an experience with 5-MeO DMT.
Yes, yes.
How did your session or your experience speed up or enhance your awakening process?
I think it gave me a preview of what's
Uh-huh.
possible. Yeah, and I remember after my 5 MO experience, which was about 6 years ago, maybe I can't remember. But after that experience, my meditation just went off. My meditation just sped up. Like I had all this energy, and I was redirecting those energy, those almost like Kundalini energy. That was before like I had a little
Yes.
mini awakening, but I was directing all that Kundalini energy to meditation. But what was happening was like I was just dissolving super fast. Yeah, because, like, if what 5-MeO-DMT does or what any psychedelic does ultimately is they remove your lenses of perception, like, they remove your conditionings and the filters you have, uh,
Hmm.
that's built up through your entire life, all at once. With 5-MeO, it's all at once for, like,
Yeah.
20 minutes. For LSD, it's slower, right? Slower dissolution, but the reason why people experience through, like, walls breathing, things like morphing into each other, penetrating each other, is because they're becoming less solidified. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, can you just maybe describe how your session went down? Like, did you do it one on one? Did you do it alone? And what can you remember of it?
Yeah, I did it with the shaman, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh, funny thing. When I did that, I actually have to do 2 doses. The first, okay, I did it. Actually, I had 2 sessions. The previous session with 5-MeO was about a year before that. And I broke through, but I didn't break through. I broke through, but I was still stuck and trapped in another realm. So that realm is the whole universe was having sex. So I was my own conditioning because I was a sex addict. So when I access like infinite consciousness, whatever, that's filtered to my own conditioning, and my conditioning was sex. So when my conditioning was merging with the context of this, vast spaciousness of empty awareness, it gave me this illusion that I was in this dimension where I was every single being on the planet having sex with it itself, like a cosmic orgy. The second time I did it, a year later, I had the same vision, and I realized that was not it. I needed to go deeper. I don't know why I realized that, but because I didn't know back then, like all those experiences, like mystical states or you experience on psychedelic, are just a byproduct and a side effect of this illusion. But somehow I just knew that. Oh, I think I heard Leo Gura talk about his experiences. He was like, "Okay, when you really break through on 5-MeO DMT, there's not much visuals. You're just perceiving the such of reality, just perceiving pure consciousness. And you could be sitting here and looking at the trees, but then now you're perceiving the trees as quote unquote consciousness." So I was like, I'm not perceiving that right now yet because I'm still like in my subconscious, even though my subconscious stuff in there is like infinite. So I took another dose and then I broke through out of that cosmic orgy kind of scenario. And then I was just perceiving everything as it is. And then at that moment, I was like, okay, this is what they've been talking about. All the teachings about spirituality, about like awakening, non-duality, this is what they're talking about. So I think I had a glimpse of somewhere between unbounded consciousness and non-dual union. But then that lasted for like 10 minutes, and then I was contracted back into my ego mind. Actually, my ego mind came back even stronger after that. I went through a phase of dark night of the soul.
Yes,
And that's what
yes.
happens with psychedelics. Yeah, we can talk about that, but that's exactly what happened. And then I went to my second retreat maybe a few months after that. That's when I first accessed the unbounded consciousness without any psychedelics.
Maybe just a quick question to wrap up maybe the whole psychedelic field, because you say that everything you see is still something in your subconscious, and that makes a lot of sense for me too when I think about all the experiences I've had besides DMT. And there's a lot of people who say the same thing, that DMT brings you somewhere where they feel it has nothing to do with your subconscious. It has nothing to do even with this world, with this existence. Almost like there's something completely independent from all the things here. And this is still one of the few things I'm still like trying to figure out what is it, like, because from the theory of what you're also teaching, it has to still be something of us. But how would you describe it, or did you experience the same thing?
Yeah, I experienced it. Like when I was going through the path, there were so many experiences I had, not just on psychedelic, but through meditation or just spontaneous unfoldment, where I felt like I was accessing another dimension. But then I realized all the experiences are just the subconscious, or at least just the stuff of your own mind projected outward, right? But then at the same time, talking like that creates a duality between like the universe and you. But there is no
Yeah.
such duality. So even talking like that doesn't really make sense either, right?
Yeah.
So it's the way I experience reality is like there's no inside nor outside, right? There is no like universe and the separate mind that's perceiving it. It's all just one unity. And I would say the middle way is the codependent arising process of your reality and your brain. That's, I think, the most accurate to describe it.
Yeah.
Observer's effect. Things come into existence only through the process of interaction. Reality only exists because of your consciousness, and consciousness only exists because of reality. So
Yes.
subject and object codependent arise. That's the
Yeah.
insight into the middle way, which is the insight with anatta realization, actually. You take the middle way and transcend both of the extremities. Oh, it's only in your mind versus, oh, it's all God mind. It's all the universe. And then you kind of collapse the two duality.
You also talk about, and that's actually the first video I've watched, which completely blew me away. It was like 2 years ago. I can't remember it, but it was definitely about one of your videos where you talked about the guy who also reached self-realization or awakening as a free diver, not even like meditating, not even trying to enlighten, no context to all of those things, but just through somehow a physical reaction. And you basically brought to my attention that science and enlightenment is completely compatible, and that it is almost like a reboot of your system.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
also that's also when you talk about Kundalini, you know, that's when everything started to make sense. Why you do yoga? Why do you try to expand your body so you can like hold more energy and actually like dissolve more? So can you just in your own experience, in your own words, describe a little bit of that, because I think it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, I think awakening from one level or from one lens is a completely physical and biological transformation. That's why
Hmm.
you mentioned I cure my bipolar disorder. It is a neurological process in a sense, right? So if you completely transform your nervous system and upgrade your nervous system, the potentiality is infinite in terms of like what kind of like I don't want to. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't want to
Yeah.
into a truth, but at least for me personally, I took medication for like maybe a year and I stopped. But then, of course, the bipolar process is a biological and neurological process. Some can say even say it's genetic, but I quote unquote like overcame that. So
Hmm.
that just proves to me that there's something physical about this. You're wiring the brain at a very fundamental level, right? But then at the same time, you don't want to be stuck in a materialistic paradigm too and say, "Oh, everything is just a brain," because that's another extreme view that we're trying to.
Exactly.
That's the same view as everything is consciousness, but they both extreme views. In the middle way, it collapses both of those dualities. It transcends them, but includes them both. I can speak from both sides.
Man, it's so funny that you say that, because the last time I took ayahuasca, the last two times, ayahuasca always tried to force me into this everything is energy, Misha. You just fucking you like give up the materialistic notion and everything is energy. And I felt that if I let go of it, I will be completely insane when I come back. Like I won't be the same person anymore. It almost felt like the biggest ego death if I would let go of it. So I was scared and I was holding on to. But then when I was like integrating the sessions, I realized exactly that. I'm like, can it just be both?
Yeah,
can,
exactly. Yeah,
can it just be both somehow?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like the brain thing is like, oh, you're inside, right? And then the consciousness thing would be like you're outside. But then the realization, the direct experience of this realization, what I call like non-locality, is neither in here nor there, nor anywhere in between. So you can't land anywhere. But that's actually how your direct experience is if you sort of remove the perceiver or something in the center that's directing your attention to the world out there to reinforce that subject-object duality. Yeah.
Mhm.
And those different views what contract you too, right? The view of like materialism, the view of like, oh, idealism, even like solipsism or even like panpsychism. All these isms are actually just views. And views contract you because a view is a belief. It's an
Uh-huh.
identification, right? You're identified with like the nature of reality being this way or that way. And that creates a
Yeah.
physical contraction, emotional contraction, and psychological contraction. That you have to remove all of that. But then after you remove it, you can now slap on the label, slap on the different lenses, the filters, and then you just become this infinite shapeshifter that this you can just become anything. You can speak from any kind of paradigm and not attach to any. No, there's no grasping. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's so funny because I read that somewhere that the Buddha back then in the days didn't didn't even make a distinction between sensations and thoughts. Like he said
Yes.
that it's both contraction. And when I read that, and because you always talk about contraction, and I remember a lot of times I was always thinking about like, where is my contraction? Where's my contraction? Because most people will think about physical contraction in your body. But when I was like actually observing it, I realized that every time I was thinking, my eyelids were starting to contract a little
Exactly.
bit. Like,
There we go.
almost
That's
like,
great insight.
yeah. And then I was like, whoa, that's true. Thoughts are contractions too. So every belief is almost like a piece that keeps you here, right?
Yeah,
There's still like
exactly. Yeah, that's why a lot of traditions emphasize on seeing through the thoughts so much because thoughts is a really sticky thing. Since everything is sensation, right? The body is just sensation. Thoughts, sound, sight are just sensations. It's all just sensations, actually. But just the degree of how those sensations contract, even like pure awareness, is just sensation of like nothingness, right? That's when you started talking the distinction between like background and foreground, between like content and context. But yeah, thoughts really contract you because most of us are very identified with thoughts because we're humans and we like thoughts is what in a sense makes us human, right?
yeah.
We have to operate through thoughts. And also I want to mention the key isn't to eliminate thoughts. It's not to annihilate thoughts. The whole point is not to annihilate anything. Neither is it to grasp onto anything because like grasping onto something, making something permanent and annihilating something is just two sides of the same extreme, actually. So the point is to see through thoughts, see that thoughts don't have any inherent existence, and to disengage from thoughts, but just let the thoughts be there. You can use thoughts, quote unquote, like from the outside, right? And that goes along with everything on the spiritual path. You're not trying to annihilate anything. You're just seeing through to the lack of inherent existence in everything, all phenomenons. Yeah, that's emptiness. And also, emptiness doesn't mean that things don't exist. It just means that they are dependent, arisen, and lack inherent existence. Yeah. Because once you say something doesn't exist, that's already a duality. You have to go beyond
Exactly.
existence and non-existence.
How would you describe for somebody listening right now the difference between the stage of nothingness and emptiness? Because for some people, it almost sounds like the same, right?
Right. Like I said, the nothingness phase, after you go through the witness phase, usually you oscillate between I am everything versus I am nothing. But they're actually two sides of the same coin. They both have views in extremity, actually, or experiences in extremity. Yeah. But then eventually you collapse those dualities. Yeah. So the everythingness phase, people can get trapped in ideas that they are God or the creator of the universe, right? And then they can hang on to eternalism. You know, the Buddha said there are three kinds of craving. One is central craving, which we're all familiar with. Another one is craving for being or craving for existence. And the third one is craving for non-being and non-existence. Right. So the nothingness phase could be a trap because people can become nihilistic, right? They'll be like, oh, yeah, it's just nothingness, right? Maybe they're perceiving nothingness as this entirety of this field as being nothing, but there's still some kind of a view in extremity there that you want to dissolve. The emptiness is seen through the inherent existence of everythingness, nothingness, just the same way you saw through the ego mind, right? So emptiness is not really negating anything; it's just integrating everything and transcending everything.
Talking about nihilism, maybe to just like make a quick turn into philosophy again. Did you ever study Camus, like absurdism?
Not particularly Camus, but I'm a little bit familiar with him. But I was really into the phenomenologists, like existentialists, like Sartre,
Yeah,
Heidi, people like that. I love those guys before.
yeah.
I think they're onto something.
Right,
Yeah,
right. There's
something, but
some.
they didn't have the tool to like transcend even that, right? Because they're still making like nihilism. They're making a meaning out of meaninglessness, and they're
Yeah.
still intellectualizing about consciousness, other than embodying it, or rather than embodying it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. To bring it maybe now to where you are right now, like living as I just say like, oh, you're living as Buddha or Arhat, that like the highest stages of awakening, because I remember that when you started doing those videos and you were on podcasts of other spiritual seekers, that in the comment sections a lot of people were like calling you out for like, you're just 33 years old, how can you already claim to be self-realized? So my question to you now is, how do you know if you're fully awakened?
Well, it depends on what you mean by fully awakened too. Like even after that shit I had in May 2020, that was the beginning of an end actually. That was final in a sense that there's the emptiness axis of development is maxed out. But even after that, there's further integration and deepening. And before I go, I just want to clarify one thing about emptiness, which will put things into perspective. Another way to look at emptiness is everything is dependent arisen, right? So the nothingness is just a state that's dependent arisen. Consciousness is just something that's dependent arisen. It's arisen due to different conditionings. So it just takes the ground or the source away from consciousness or nothing or everything. Everything and nothingness is also codependent arising.
Mhm.
So we have to remember that when we talk about emptiness. It's like things are relational.
Would you say codependent arising is another word for duality?
Uh, I would say codependent arising is the collapse of is one way to collapse duality because you realize all dualities are codependent arising.
Uh-huh.
The
Uh-huh.
subject
Exactly.
object codependent arise. So when
Yeah.
something is codependent arising, they manifest together, but neither of them has any inherent existence apart from this interaction. So when something is manifesting each other like that and creating each other, they're simultaneously canceling each other out. It's almost like everything's penetrating each other, yet nothing is touching. It's kind of like quantum entanglement or like the observer's effect, right? Things are only in a state of potentiality, right? But then you observe something and then boom, it comes into existence. But the observer is also just pure potentiality. So it's a bunch of potentialities coming together to give rise to a bunch of pure potentialities. So that's the mindfuck,
It's a really
right?
deep mind fuck,
Yeah.
yeah.
So everything is kind of like neither existing nor not existing. Things are neither particles nor waves, or both, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, like I said, like listening to you for the last 2 years definitely brought my perception deeper too. Like just from listening to you, and it's amazing actually to feel it in everyday life, like to integrate the meditation into everyday life. And I think the reason why I resonate so much with your stuff is because you also are a very like a visual person. Like everything you say sounds like an image in my head. So maybe to bring it back to the question of like how much awakening can you still attain? You know, like are you maxed out right now? I would say for me, when I talk about myself, and I'm definitely not where you are right now, but there's a lot of like the emotional stuff that now starts to become more
Oh yeah,
relevant.
yeah.
Like I realized like, oh shit, there's actually also this like emotional thing. Would you say that's also where you are right now? Or like how did the last 4 years taught you new stuff? Like where was your progress, your
Yeah.
deepening?
Yeah, the deepening, that's one of the deepenings actually. So I said the first you wake up and then you clean up and then you grow up. But then it's not just like a one-time thing. You go through cycles and cycles of this cycle. So you open up consciousness or the mind, whatever, you have an open, right? And then your subconscious stuff is going to come out. Your condition is going to come out to be integrated or be dissolved into this opening. And when more of your stuff come out, the moment you bring your subconscious to the consciousness, bring the shadow to the light, that's the moment that you have another opening. So because the more you open up, the more deeper you go into the subconscious. And the more subconscious stuff or the more conditioning or shadow you dissolve, the wider, the more boundless consciousness becomes. So you just keep it open up the space more and more and more. And while simultaneously dissolving like the stuff that makes you like a separate entity more and more. And more. So that's pretty much another way to describe the process until you completely lose the center, and then you also kind of break through the bubble of consciousness and everything becomes boundarylessness or without circumference. But even after that, there are still very subtle conditionings that continue to
Uh-huh.
get dissolved. Another way I describe it is you remove the tree trunk permanently.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That's the anatta realization. And after that, the trees is gone. The tree is gone, but then there's still branches and leaves floating around that eventually will get dissolved and evaporate into empty space, so to speak. So that's the process that I'm going through.
Yeah, this is where I'm still not sure how attractive it is. I mean, for my ego, it definitely doesn't sound attractive at all, but like attaining that kind of like realization, because I mean, the only bias that connects every human on this planet to a certain degree is I am alive. Like we can all say that this is the biggest limiting belief we all have is like I am alive, and therefore I am afraid of not being alive, of being death. And somehow every time I come to this like really deep realization of like I'm actually not alive, something in me says don't let go of that, because then you have almost like zero incentive to keep yourself alive. Maybe that's when you go, maybe that's going to be a next dark night of the soul. I don't know what it is, but it feels like very, very existential, almost like the tectonic plates of my existence will start to crack open and there's something new which is going to appear. So did you already feel like you went through this stage of like, I
Yeah.
am actually not alive and
Well,
I'm
I
also
wouldn't
not
say I'm
deaf?
not alive. I think the life versus death duality is another one that you transcend. It's kind of
Yeah.
like Schrodinger's cat in quantum physics, right? A cat is neither dead nor alive before perceiving it. So that's kind of like state you're in, like a state of pure potentiality. Actually, another paradox is the more quote unquote dead you are in terms of like the separate self, the more life there is. So one way I describe it is you're totally dead. That's why there's only life. Actually, all you experience is life, actually, right? But then life also includes death, right? Because the only reason why we're ever born is because we are going to die, and we came from like quote unquote non-existence. So
Hmm.
so in Buddhism, they call this state the deathless or the unborn. It's something that transcends even the duality between life and death, because life and death is still a process that's in time in the conventional reality. Not saying that conventionally your mitsu won't die, but this goes beyond life and death. So the only reason why you make the statement, "Oh, I don't want to be dead, I want to be alive," that's presupposes the other side of the duality too.
Hmm.
So that's the duality that you eventually dissolve. Yeah. See, the funny thing is the reason why you say you don't wanna die is because you've already died. That's the point I was trying to make. because time doesn't exist linearly, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
time exists in this field where there is really no distinction between past, future, and present, right? It's all happening simultaneously, and the codependent rights too, past, future, and present, right? So that's why all of them are empty, right? So you've already died. You're all already dead. That's why you
Yes,
are alive.
yes, yes,
So by
yes.
saying that I don't want to die, it presupposes you're already dead. But then here you are,
Uh-huh,
non-existence and existence. That duality doesn't make sense anymore.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can understand it, but every time I come to the place of it, like experientially, it still feels very, very threatening. And it almost brings me to this I read one of the books that actually like shook me really deeply was The End of Your World by Ajahn
Oh, I love
Shanti.
that book. Great book.
Yeah, I don't know why, but when I read it, I was like, holy fuck, there's something so deeply psychotic about awakening. Because before that,
Yeah.
I was always like, yeah, you know, awakening sounds so cool. And also like teachers like Rupert Spira, they just teach you this direct path and it sounds so innocent and so easy. But then when I read Adyashanti and all the emotional baggage and all the shadows that come up and all it's almost like inevitable if you really want to see the truth
Yeah.
that you will go through dark nights of the soul and through psychotic episodes. Would you confirm?
Yeah. Personally, yeah, I went through all of that, but I was a pretty extreme person. You can see just from the way I did like lifting and stuff, and all my like performance art. So my path was also very like quote unquote bipolar and very extreme. But not everyone want to go through that. But you seem to be like a very extreme person as well. But the good news is, if you experience a lot of dark night, the other side of that coin is what is mystical experiences and bliss, right? Yeah, so you can experience a lot of that too. But some people don't experience a lot of dark nights, but most of them don't really experience that many like mystical experiences or like bliss. Well, of course, it's not like this is not like a definite truth because everyone is
Mhm.
different. Every context is different. Every point of your path is different. Just like every time you take psychedelics is a little different, right? Nothing stays the same. But I will say most of the time, people who are extreme, they experience both sides equally. So you get to
Yeah.
have all the spiritual candies, but there's something that's got to give, right? But then eventually you just go back and forth between those two extremities, right? Dark night of the soul, like God state, mystical experiences, and then you transcend them.
Yes, yes, yes. What do you think happens to the people? Because that's the craziest fear I've had coming into my first Vipassana. When I started to read about people in India that went to Vipassanas and then killed themselves, and then I was like, "Holy shit! What do you think is happening there? Like, what are they not able to feel, or not able to realize, or not able to transcend?"
Yeah, they actually all the fear on this path is completely irrational because what you really are can't die. So illusions can't die either. So what are you afraid of? You're just letting go of illusions. You're letting go of certain beliefs, but those beliefs are so ingrained into your psychology, into your subconscious that you think your life is dependent on it. For example, the thought of I. Most people who commit suicide, why do they point a gun to their head? They're trying to silence their inner voice. They're trying to quote unquote kill their ego.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just trying to kill an idea. But an idea was never real in the first place. It's just something you see through. It's just a thought, right? The separate self actually, another way to describe it, it's just a thought. But that idea creates so much like contraction in the body. So it becomes very real.
So let's say you would be diagnosed with a terminal cancer diagnosis. Wouldn't you say there would be conditioning of you that would start to contract from it?
Maybe. I don't know yet because I haven't been
Yeah,
diagnosed with
yeah,
cancer.
because
Yeah.
yeah, because that's just something I'm like still
I think
because
biological, just like, okay, that's the same question as if the car is about to run towards me and then gonna run me over. Am I gonna react? Is my nervous system
yeah,
gonna react and run away? Of course, yeah, because
of
that's just
course,
the
right?
thing. Yeah. Am I gonna get hungry? Do I still need water and food? Yeah, those
Yeah.
very basic biological instincts are still there.
But there is people they claim they can just survive from the sun, right?
Oh yeah. But there's a lot of people that can do very extreme stuff with their body, but that doesn't mean that they have a realization. Yeah, people who can train themselves to like swallow swords, right? They can endure immense pain, but that's not like direct correlation to seeing the true nature of the mind, really. But I will say that after realization, your pain tolerance does go up by quite a bit. That's why I can work out more without feeling tired.
Are you still trying to like what is your relationship with bodybuilding nowadays?
Yeah, I actually enjoy lifting weights way more than before because
Yeah?
I don't have any expectations. I
You
don't
just
really.
go
I
flow
just go.
state?
Yeah, I just go like I still go like maybe once every other day. If I have time. If I'm on vacation, maybe I don't have time, I don't go, but that doesn't bother me. But before it was a lot of clinging to like, okay, I have to lift weights, I have to
Uh-huh.
follow a certain diet, but all that went away. I just do it because that's just the course of the least resistance. Also because that was one of the programs that I built up before awakening for like 15 years, and then it's just
Yeah,
like a program to have. Like it's not giving me suffering. Why
it's
not look
hard.
good? Why not
It's
look
hard.
good and be this
Yeah.
state at the same time, right? Your misu is still something that you want to take care of. Like I think one of the teachers that I really like made a video that's really interesting. The title of the video is "Self-Care for Non-Self." She's like the actually the more you realize non-self, the more you got to take care of the mitsu, because a lot of people can get trapped into this "I'm not the body, I'm not the mind" kind of mindset, and that's not balanced.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I actually think bodybuilding is one of the most key factors that kept me grounded throughout all those years of like spiritual awakening and unfoldments.
Yes,
You keep lifting.
definitely, man.
Yeah, yeah,
Definitely,
yeah,
bro.
keep lifting,
That
yeah,
weight's keeping you on the
yeah,
gravity. You feel the
exactly.
gravity on your.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of the things that really keep you grounded. But also, like I'm always trying to bridge dualities, right? Like, there's a lot of dualities being created, at least in most people's minds, between like spiritual awakening, spiritual work, and like bodybuilding. But that duality is also just not an illusion. Why can't you be a very aesthetic mitsu while at the same time seeing through the emptiness of the mitsu? You
Yeah.
can experience this body as being just clouds of empty sensations while at the same time making it aesthetic and making it healthy. That's the middle way.
I I still remember going to my first like ayahuasca retreat 4 or 5 years ago, and everybody was looking at me so judgmental because I looked like different than everybody else. Like I had regular clothes, I was muscular, and everybody was like, "Who is this fucking guy? Like, why is he not like?"
That was like that when I went to art school, and I actually enjoyed that. I actually like made that into a mindfuck. I was like, okay, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna create my protein shake around art school, and all the skinny people are just painting. But I'm just like walking around with my tank top.
Are you still drinking protein and taking creatine?
Sometimes if I feel like it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Not creatine anymore, but like I
Yeah.
have protein shakes laying around, and then sometimes I just take it. Yeah, I actually
Mhm.
got pretty shredded the last like few months just because
You
I don't know
travel
why.
so much, right?
Yeah, I travel a lot, but not so much in the last 6 months. I went to Asia for a month, but other than that, I've just been in Maryland. So I have a lot of time to, do my own thing, and the gym is right next to my house, so I go to the gym quite a lot. So I got pretty shredded without trying to be. Yeah.
How does a day-to-day life of Frank Yang today looks like and feels like? What are you doing? How can I imagine that?
Uh, it feels like I'm just at rest all the time, but I'm actually doing a million things. That's the one thing about realization is actually increases your productivity. So a lot of people get into non-duality and have this mindset of, oh, there's nothing to do and you should just like not do anything. And that's a phase some people go through, but if that's your permanent phase, I wouldn't say it's very well integrated. Some people just lay around and do nothing, and like you can get drunk in emptiness, right? You can get stuck in emptiness. This whole idea, there's no one here, there's nothing to do. That's view in extremity. But then,
Mhm.
I actually think, like, your productivity and just because your nervous system, your brain is working at a much more efficient level, you can actually produce more. So I wake up in the morning and I do breath work, and I still do, like, an hour of do nothing meditation. And then, usually, if I don't go to the gym, if I go to the gym, I go to the gym. If I don't go to the gym, I'll just sit down and edit my videos for however long, sometimes usually, like, around 3 or 4 hours, and then I'll do, like, a Skype call or a coaching call. Either before or after lifting, but I pretty much do the same thing every day, and I do coaching calls, and then, sometimes talk to people like yourself, podcast interviews,
Mhm.
maybe more coaching calls if I have, more clients, and then more editing. If I'm
Yeah.
traveling, I do a lot of filming, and then, maybe I'll take a nap and do some yoga nidra, uh
Mhm.
yeah, and then my day is pretty filled up actually. Sometimes I watch a movie at night. Pretty normal shit actually, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. It's normal
yeah,
shit.
way more than before, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not doing anything. It feels like you're in absolute rest. And because you're in absolute rest, you can actually do more, right? Because
Everything
the
gets done.
yeah, because the movement and non-movement is neither movement nor non-movement at the end, right? Movement and non-movement becomes the same. Doing nothing and doing everything becomes the same.
Effortless.
Yeah.
Effortlessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of breath work are you doing?
Oh, Wim Hof. Wim Hof and alkaline breathing, breath of fire, shamanic breathing,
Uh-huh.
the pretty basic stuff. I actually find breath work to be one of the most important tools, especially after awakening or when
Yes.
you have an opening to integrate, because like you are literally physically breathing out a lot of your conditionings.
Yes. Maybe to also just bring the Kundalini awakening in because I watched your video And it was interesting because you were the first one who brought to my attention that you can have a Kundalini awakening completely spontaneous without any breath work. Like you didn't even do anything back then. You were just doing Vipassana, I think, right?
Yeah,
And then all of
yeah,
a sudden,
yeah.
can you just explain the situation again? What happened and how you felt and what you went through?
I think I went through a Kundalini awakening. Actually, what triggered that awakening was, of course, the years of meditation in my second retreat, which I got like quote unquote stream entry. Like that was my first glimpse into. I had my first cessation, my first glimpse into like emptiness, and after that, things just started unraveling really fast. And it was also triggered on the relative level by uh, death of my grandparents. No, just my grandpa actually. Sorry, death of my grandpa, and the breakup with me and my ex girlfriend. So that triggered a
Mhm.
lot of conditioning getting released. So breath work
Mm.
is actually the same thing. You're just kind of like releasing a lot of your blockages, right? Your conditioning and the energy blockages in your body. You're just releasing it by breathing into it. Right. So that's what breath work does. So yeah, breath work can trigger Kundalini stuff for sure. Okay, Vipassana actually, because Vipassana, you actually go into your body and you're just scanning, right? You're just peeling the solidity of your body mind layer by layer by layer. What is that? That's releasing energy too. Because the only reason why your energy isn't flowing is because of the contraction in the body.
Yes.
So the Kundalini stuff or even psychedelics are just a byproduct of you releasing the blockages so the energy is flowing freely. But before you're completely dissolved, those energy that are already started to flow is gonna run into the rest of the solidity. That's actually what gives rise to this experience of like bliss or dark night of the soul, actually. But when you're completely like almost like at least like most of your stuff is cleaned out, the energy is free flowing. There's nothing in the center that's blocking it. So it's almost like the wind that cannot feel itself. When you're pure energy, you actually don't really feel the energy. It's just like the eyeball that cannot see itself.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully explained. That's actually why I really love like exactly those explanations. They help me the most somehow. Like I read so many books about that stuff, but just hearing it from somebody in the 21st century, like I already know who does bodybuilding. Like the way you'd explain it, it sounds
Yeah,
very
it's
easy
really
to
quick about
comprehend.
yeah, it's extremely easy to comprehend. It's
Yeah.
extremely straightforward actually, right? You're just using different methods to dissolve the contraction in the body mind until you like become the sky. That's why you
Yeah.
always are, right? It's just been
um,
like filtered. Yeah.
I just want to tell you about one experience I've had on my first Vipassana because you mentioned stream entry, and I heard that term after I've experienced what I've experienced, but I'm still not sure what it was. So maybe you can help me. So it was day 5, and it was the Vipassana session for 1 hour, and I felt extremely already very like happy about sitting down for an hour, and I was already like embracing blissfully the state, and I was in like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I felt like my whole body was vibrating, and it felt amazing, and I literally didn't move for an hour, and I smiled, and after an hour, when the when Gwenka started to sing, I just remember that there was just I wasn't really there was no psychedelic experience, there was no visual change, there was nothing, but it was just I felt like I wasn't there anymore, and there was like a half an hour of like walking, eating, that everything just happened. There was no identification with anything, and then after like a half an hour, I would say, there was all of a sudden a thought came. The first thought after half an hour, and that was like, "Am I enlightened?" And that thought created almost like a
Yeah,
fear
exactly.
of like, what's happening here? And then I was like, why am I here? What? This is not good. I'm out of control. And then the fear went on, and I was back in that state. I cried actually in my room because the first thought that came to my mind was, why is it? What is it worth to live? And then love came. The word love came, and I was like, oh wow, this is beautiful. But still, I was not in that state anymore. And the 5 days after that in Vipassana, I was craving that moment again,
Right.
and therefore I wasn't even coming close to that anymore. Like I was trapped in the craving state.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So what was that in your opinion?
That was a glimpse into non-doership or
Yeah,
maybe some stages of not self. Yeah, definitely a legit genuine
weird.
opening. Yeah. So yeah, I guess you could say that the natural state is a permanent state like that. Uh,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
But I don't know exactly what you experienced, but the elements of what you described that I can relate to
Yeah.
moment to moment. Um, Yeah, it depends on what you mean by stream entry too, because there's so many different definitions of it. Right, so many different definitions of it. So that's worth another conversation because the stream entry in like the sutras time versus have you read Daniel Ingram's work?
No, not
Okay,
yet.
you check that out. You should check that out. Yeah, he has his own kind of definition of stream entry that was different from other teachers, but they all point to similar things at the end, and there's just different way to manifest it. You know, some people
Uh-huh.
say you have a cessation where it's just complete blinking out of existence in terms of like you just have no consciousness even for like a split second. Some people do think that just have a temporary glimpse of the first time you see clearly how there isn't a self, and there isn't a separate self.
Mm-hmm.
That the separate self is illusion. Some people, some traditions, some teacher will categorize that as a streamentary experience. Sure, yeah, yeah,
The way I interpreted it when I read or I listened to you, for me was this point of no return. Like now I've seen too much and there's no
right,
way
right.
back. That's how it felt. Like, bro, you
Yeah,
won't be
yeah.
you
There's no way.
can't
Yeah,
unsee it.
yeah. You can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Um
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah, I never got that glimpse on my first retreat actually. But what you experienced with the total body dissolution, that's what Goenka calls a banka. That's already a pretty deep absorption already. That's pretty like maybe like fourth or fourth jhana.
Yeah.
That's
I
it.
mean on my second retreat was completely nothing happening basically. I was in resistance for the first 7-8 days and then I had slight little jhana 1 or 2, I don't know. So it completely didn't want to happen the
Yeah,
second
those
time.
things come when you least expect them. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly. I just want to like also ask you because I just started to prepare for this podcast. I started to listen to your recent video where you guys talk about psychedelics, and your guest, he said that he took 800 micrograms of acid and didn't feel anything basically. And I always heard this like story of Ram Dass giving his teacher like
Yeah.
1,000 micrograms, and I always felt it was an urban legend. But now listening to him and the way he talked, it didn't sound like he wanted to make up something. And you also said that you just tried like psychedelics again after quite some time and he didn't have an effect.
Except for a
I
little bit
mean,
of like bodily energy. It's almost like I felt like I drank like 3 cups of coffee, but
that's
there's no like visual,
crazy, man.
there's no psychedelic
That's
trip.
crazy.
Yeah, because like I said, the psychedelic experiences are just the side effect and the byproduct of the dissolution, right? So when you're already pretty dissolved, or when you already feel like everything's boundless, there's not much to dissolve. So psychedelics don't really work anymore, right? It's almost like you putting air on air. Like I said earlier, like the wind that can feel itself, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Maybe another question, which I used to be very worried about, and I still hear people being scared of this idea because you also realize that time is more or less an illusion. Would you say that? Would you say that today you have a harder time dealing with time, or like how do you perceive time in your everyday life?
Timelessness. Yeah. Like you can still perceive time on a conventional level, but you know it's a construct. You know, well, you can't say time don't exist or like space doesn't exist. You just perceive time as another process of dependent origination. It's codependent arising. Yeah. So you see through the emptiness of time, but you can still
Mhm.
like sometimes I have to set alarm now because like sometimes I'll forget appointments unless I set alarms. But other than that, it's not much of a problem for me. Yeah. When I need to do things, I still do things. Yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, you don't experience linear time anymore. That's for sure. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Um, my last big topic, which I am really excited to talk about with you, because you already mentioned that you used to have a sex addiction, and I would say that I wouldn't consider myself sex addicted, but definitely I have some compulsivity around it, and I just fucking like sex, and so far it doesn't feel like it changed that part. It almost feels like I'm even more able to enjoy everything and accept who I am even
Yeah.
more and
That's
actually
the
make the
problem.
best out of it. And for some reason I have an intuition that you're like I just want to know, where are you in your process? Like how is your sex life changed through the awakening
Yeah, it changed
process?
almost completely. I can still enjoy sex actually more than before. Here's the thing, another paradox about this path is that you get to have your cake, eat it too. You get to enjoy everything even more because now you're more sensitive to everything, right? Everything becomes like 4K, 8K. right? So, yeah, another way I describe this path is going from like 720 to like 1080 to like 4K to like 360, like 8K. So imagine having sex in that state. It's very enjoyable. But at the
Uh,
same time, you're not identified with the sensations. Yeah, so it's really weird feeling. But at the same time, it makes complete sense. Uh, I don't have identity around sex anymore. That's a major
no?
difference. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
before, a major part of my sexual adventure was to satisfy my conditioning or my identity as someone who is, like this masculine male who can like have sex with a lot of women. That's an identity. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even trying to have sex for the sex. I was trying to have sex to satisfy that part of my identity. Of course, I still like enjoy sex, but before it was filtered by all that lens of perception. Right? Or like when I'm having sex, I'm thinking about having sex with the next girl or like hotter girl. But now if I'm having sex now, it's just in the moment. So I don't have one night stand anymore. Not because I try not to have not have one night stands, but before I was like, okay, if I don't have sex with different women every week, I go like crazy. But now I cannot have sex for a very long time and I don't have cravings for it. Yeah, I don't really masturbate that much anymore. Maybe like once every 2 weeks, whereas before I was masturbating like 3 to 5 times a week. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So sex only arises when the conditionality arises, and you enjoy it in the moment. And when you not having sex, you don't think about it.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I'm not trying to suppress sex or try to do Nofap or anything like that, because to me, that's just creating more cravings.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But you're
Yeah,
right.
it's
During the process, you can sometimes feel like your sex drive becomes even more powerful, especially when your Kundalini stuff is unfolding. I was feeling so horny during my Kundalini stuff. It's like holy fuck, I just want to fuck every single girl that I see.
yeah. For me it's weird, man. It's almost like this I also studied Tantra for the last 2 years, and all through all the breath work, I just started to realize how powerful it is. So I don't want to call myself a spiritual fuckboy, but I feel like I shifted
Right?
I shifted through this like more spiritual way of like relating, and through that, by not needing it, by not wanting it, I'll get it more, and I also
Yeah.
indulge in it. And I'm still somehow sometimes question my motivation and also the ethics of it, since ethics is also just a concept, whatever you want to call it, but still, because the feminine part, which is not strongly developed in me, is not I just feel like the feminine still wants that unity very, very much. So sometimes I feel like because I travel around the world, and it's super easy for me to set a boundary and to say like, look, I'm here for a month, let's enjoy this, but that's the day I'm gonna leave. And she's like, okay, let's go. We have a beautiful time, but then after a month, for me, it's easier to separate. And sometimes I feel if there's still something I'm missing, because through Tantra, I also learned that the subject object split, you call it, that's also the most beautiful thing about Tantra, is to unify and to somehow, even like my Tantra teacher is actually really deeply convinced of monogamy. And I would call him also very enlightened. But he
Oh wow.
says, Misha, you have to learn that Tantra is actually like the unification of the subject object split, and realizing that there's
Well,
nothing
there's such a split.
else.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if you fuck one woman, you fuck every woman in the world. And you don't have to experience everything because you are everything. And if you really embody that, there's nothing else to do anymore. And since then, I'm mind
Makes
fucked
sense.
because there's a part of
Makes sense.
me who believes it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of like my progression as well. It's like right now, I'm fine with just having like one partner for like I'm not. I don't have the boundary of monogamy, which is kind of naturally unfolded. Right now, the conditionality is set up so that now I don't try to do it, but just like the course of these resistance is like I just have one partner for
Hmm.
X amount of time, and when that conditionality runs out, it runs out. But so far, I've been with the same partner for almost a year, and then my previous partner was also for like 6 or 7 months. And in between these times, I didn't have sex with other people. Whereas before, that cannot happen. I have to do something about that, right? So yeah, you just and then you just enjoy that union with that one person, and you realize that wait, sex is not the center of attention anymore because
Yes.
another way I describe this state is kind of like the universe is fucking itself raw without a condom. You hear me say that?
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
so
One of my
if the
favorite.
universe is always fucking itself raw without a condom, then you can still enjoy sex on the human level, but that just becomes something that's like eating a really nice meal. Like you're not like you don't think too much about it. You have a nice meal and that's it. But in a sense, like everything after awakening or after a
Is
certain awakening
tantric.
is tantra. You're just integrating the Tantra is just integration, right? You're just trying to bring every moment in your life on the conventional world into the ultimate until they merge as one, right? So that's what it is. But then people use sex as the object of Tantra because we have so much conditionings around sex that if you can dissolve that conditioning, then the rest of the conditioning, the chances of them becoming tantric is it seems like almost way easier in a sense, right? Because if you can experience subject-object split in something that you have, at least for me, if something that creates so much separation in you, so much contraction in you, then
Wow.
everything is a piece of cake. And I do think that's one of the reason why people think of sex when they think of tantra. It's not like sex is the only thing that's tantric. Everything is tantric. Even
Everything is
bodybuilding,
tantric.
yeah. Yeah, you just say integrating, like embodying in things. You're embodying the physical world with the formless until there's no more distinction between the two.
Yeah,
Utilizing
it's
as a tool for that. That's it, right?
it's basically like you also call it with Dzogchen, like you turn you turn attention towards itself. So that's what you do in Tantra with desire. Like instead of like following desire, you follow desire back into its origination, and that's the big fuck. That's the big orgasm, right? Like it's like if you
Yeah,
turn,
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
like
you're directing the energy. Yeah, yeah.
yes,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's like you're using the most powerful force in existence, which is the sexual energy, to kind of
yeah.
develop itself, so you can
It's
become the
insane.
energy. So you can become the energy. Yeah.
Yeah, the intuition I had a few years ago, why Tantra was so attractive to me, was because I saw Buddhism, and the no self idea just creates this like no self behavior in people, and they just
Yeah,
didn't look
that's
as
exactly.
alive. The tantric people, they're like, we're everything. We're all of it, including the desire, and that's why they move different. That's why they're more like we are, like more
That's more
energetic.
like
And I was like, this, I want this.
yeah, Dzogchen, that's more like Dzogchen Vajrayana. See, that's the duality between everything and nothingness that I was talking about, between like no self and the big self, right? That the Hindu
Yeah,
with other people that talk about like the ultimate big self, and Buddhism
yeah.
talk about no self. But you can get trapped in either one of them. But like the middle way takes those two extremes, transcends them, but also include them. So you can actually the ultimate realization is no self is everything. Well, nothingness is everything.
Mm.
Right, right. But then when you merge something, both disappears. So like I don't perceive this as self or no self or everything and nothing. But the thing that the one I'll mention one thing, like the more you realize no self, the more tantric you can become. That's the mindset.
Uh-huh.
It's like yeah,
Fuck.
exactly. That you have to kind of like tap into both sides of the extreme. People usually
That's
skew towards
interesting.
one side. Yeah, it's like the way I describe it is from a quote by Papa Sambhava. He's like the guy who pretty much began the Dzogchen movement, right? He's like the third Buddha, the third turning of the Dharma. He said, "My view is vaster in the sky, but my attention to details and karmas and cause and effect and their actions is as fine as a grain of particle, a grain of sand." So
Oof.
the more boundless you become, the more boundaries you can draw. The more you realize no self, the more you can actually love yourself. The more you realize there's no duality between self and other, or that the emptiness of self and others, the more intimate relationships are.
Fuck. It's crazy, man, because when I just remember I was like so scared to become like my meditation teacher in Vipassana, because I looked at him and his wife, they were sitting next to each other, and they looked like they didn't had sex for 15 years or something, and I was like,
Yeah, see,
I don't want to be I don't want to
truly.
become that equanimous, man. I
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people in the Vipassana circle are stuck in equanimity. Like they make equanimity their new thing, like their new ground. They rarefy
yeah,
or for the tantric people, they can rarefy like love and universal love. For the Buddhists,
yeah.
they can rarefy no self or like emptiness. So that's where the middle way comes in.
Uh-huh.
So like realization is actually the integration of all these different views. Yeah.
Last question, bro. So, kids, there's this spiritual concept of nirvana and samsara, which I know from your standpoint is the same thing. Nirvana is samsara, but in the theory, I feel like there's a correlation between spiritual gurus that they decide not to have kids because they're like, why should I perpetuate the cycle of suffering? But for some reason, it still feels very, for
Yeah,
me
to
at
me
least, it feels,
that's a view. It's just a belief.
yeah. So what is your opinion on kids? Like,
Yeah, I
are you
used
open
to
for
think
it?
like that. Before I started meditating, I went through a phase of like anti-nihilism. Have you heard of it? It's like you shouldn't bring life into this world. You shouldn't have a baby because it's unjust. Because there's gonna be suffering, right? So if you create a baby, that's the same thing as killing it. So we don't need more suffering in the world. We should just not have babies. But that's a view in extremity, right? I was pretty attached to that. But so I went through a phase where I just like no marriage, no baby, never. But now I'm open to everything. So, but I'm not open to having kids or not having kids. But I'm also open to both of them. Yeah. So
The middle way. The
the
middle
middle
way,
way, so,
baby.
like, and I don't think about like not having kids. That's not a belief that I have anymore. That's not a limitation anymore. But at the same time, like I'm not craving to have kids. Like my goal is to have a family. Yeah, I'm good where I am. If it just somehow rises to the close of least resistance that I have a kid, then
Yeah.
I'll embrace that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it's
what
like you
Buddha,
allow
Buddha had,
everything.
yeah, the Buddha had kids and wife, right?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I don't know. There's many Buddhas, no? Like, I'm not sure
Oh, I'm talking
which
about the guy, the prince, like the
the
Gautama Buddha.
Gataman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that he had kids. Yeah, one of his kid was actually his student, or maybe all of them.
Okay.
But he had a family. Yeah.
Nice, man.
But
Man,
I do think that a lot of the inclination for us to have family and children are conditions. So a lot of people are just following.
yes.
So if you
Yes, yes, yes.
without that condition, maybe that the nature's inclination is not to have kids for that particular person who is
But there's
dissolved.
this biological conditioning. I mean, the reason why sex feels so amazing is
Yeah,
that, I mean, the nerve cells, like they signalize, come in this woman to not because I want to make her pregnant, but because the most
exactly.
deepest visceral part of
Yeah,
myself wants
your
to.
brain is programmed that way. Yep, I agree with
Yeah,
that.
it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, so far I haven't had the biological urge to have children yet, but I know a lot of women, especially women that I talk to around like my age, they seem to have that.
Yeah.
So I do think there is a natural inclination to have children, correct? Yeah. But just like I think awakening can reduce your biological conditioning, like a lot of it. That's why I don't
Uh-huh.
feel horny most of the time anymore. Like, why is that? Like, maybe you can say my bipolar tendency is also in a sense biological for me, but somehow I transcended that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And that's a big message, man. Like, I know we're not clinicians, we're not scientists, but we're creating this paradigm, at least, like the codependent arising of the idea, at least in the field, and the chance for people to go that path. And I just want to acknowledge you for that, man. Like I said, I'm following you for 10 years now. And the last 2 years were very inspiring to follow you. So please just keep doing what you're doing. And I still hope we're going to see each other live one day
Oh
somewhere in the
yeah,
world.
yeah, yeah. You say you want to go to Berlin, right? Like I'm actually planning on
Yeah.
maybe do a Europe trip, but the thing, like I don't really know until maybe like 2 weeks, like maybe
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
month, 2 weeks before. So I'll let you know. But I saw your
Yeah.
dates. I do want to go to like Europe sometime, like maybe this year, but it just hasn't. The condition hasn't arisen yet when I feel like I got the tickets. But I do have a couple of friends in Berlin that's I've been talking to. So and
Nice.
also in UK, I have a client in UK who wants to find me a place so I can just stay there for free for a few weeks maybe. So like I'll let you know. Now that I have you, like another branch of
Yeah.
this conditioning that might arise. So
Yes.
let's talk online and then maybe we can meet up in
Nice.
Berlin. It'd be pretty cool.
Let's stay connected, bro. Thank you so much for your time and the conversation.
Yeah, it was a great conversation actually.
Alright, meine Freunde, da sind wir wieder. So, was denkst du? Hat Frank Yang wirklich die Erleuchtung erlangt? Oder ist er auch noch auf dem langen Weg? Oder gibt es diesen Weg der Erleuchtung vielleicht gar nicht? Das sind Fragen, die ich mir immer wieder stelle und deswegen wollte ich Frank Yang auch einladen und ihn mal dazu befragen. Und nach dem Gespräch würde ich persönlich für mich sagen, dass ich auf jeden Fall gemerkt habe, dass jeder Mensch am Ende des Tages irgendwo auf diesem Pfad ist und bis zum Tod auch wirklich dort nicht 100% ankommen wird. Das heißt, selbst der Buddha hat ja irgendwo noch eine Funktion in diesem Leben hier gehabt. Und so sehe ich es auch bei Frank, als ich ihn nämlich gefragt habe, woher man dann weiß, ob man jetzt wirklich erleuchtet ist. Da hat er ja selbst auch gesagt, dass das immer wieder weitergeht, dass da immer eine Vertiefung stattfindet. Und natürlich gibt es irgendwo so eine Art Grenze, wo man vielleicht nicht mehr Neues sieht, aber es immer wieder zu integrieren und auch immer wieder sich selbst zu beweisen durch das, was die Welt und das Leben ja auch zu bieten hat. Wie sehr man wirklich gefestigt ist, wie sehr man wirklich auch in sich ruht. Ich glaube, das hört nicht auf, solange wir eben, wie gesagt, in diesem Leben hier auch weiterleben. Deswegen, das sind nochmal so meine Worte zum Schluss. Aber nichtsdestotrotz kann ich sagen, dass ich Frank Yang auf jeden Fall extrem schätze für seine Arbeit. Check auf jeden Fall mal seinen YouTube-Channel ab. Er macht wirklich grandiose Videos und hat wirklich auch eine Art und Weise, diese Lehren von Buddha in seinen eigenen Worten wiederzugeben. Und das macht es für mich auf jeden Fall auch sehr attraktiv, vor allem jetzt auch hier im 21. Jahrhundert, junge Menschen darüber sprechen zu hören. Nicht immer nur die alten Worte aus den Sanskriten, sondern wirklich auch so mit moderner Sprache und auch mit dem ganzen technischen Equipment, was wir heute haben, da einfach auch mal eine neue Perspektive zu kriegen. Weil, wenn Jesus und Buddha heute leben würden, dann würden sie wahrscheinlich auch auf Social Media auftreten. Das ist zumindest mal meine persönliche Meinung. Alright, besten Dank, dass du hier warst. Wir sprechen, hören, sehen uns nächste Woche wieder. Bis dann, hau rein, dein Mischa. Peace out.